Good morning. All right, this is Holly Carter, and I'm going to be joined in just a moment by Tamara McFarland. You've got her in there? All right. Are you here, Tamara?
Yes, good morning.
Hello, good morning. And she's joining us. I reached out to an organization that has been popping up on my radar called Cooperation Humboldt. And I'm reading this off of your website, that you exist to help develop a solidarity economy across the North Coast. We identify, support, and nurture cooperative economic efforts that help people meet their needs without exploiting or oppressing anyone, without being exploited or oppressed by anyone, and without destroying the planet. And I was curious about the work that's coming up. There was one specific program that I see being rolled out called the Little Free Pantry. That was something that caught my eye and was curious about. I've heard of Little Free Libraries. I was curious about the Little Free Pantry and also about the work that you do. So, Tamara, do you want to tell us a little bit about the work and your vision, and then maybe get into some of the programs that you're running?
Sure. And before we get into the programs, maybe just to take a minute to talk about what we actually mean when we say a solidarity economy.
That's a great idea.
Yeah. So basically, our idea is that a solidarity economy is a system where everyone has their needs met in a way that doesn't exploit anyone and doesn't harm the environment. So it's a type of economy, a type of system that embodies our values of economic and social justice, cooperation, self-management, and ecological sustainability. One way of talking about it sometimes can be alternatives to capitalism. I think we're all seeing, how incredibly destructive this hyper-capitalist way of being is proving to be in our world. So solidarity economy, it articulates approaches to how the economy can better serve people and the planet rather than the people serving the economy. So there's that. And then, under our umbrella of Cooperation Humboldt, we have what we're trying to do is develop programs that address basically every area of human needs. So we have our food program, housing, education and childcare, energy and infrastructure, healthcare, arts and culture, and the economy. So within all those areas, some are more active than others. We are a newer organization, and one of the more active program areas right now is our food program, and that's where the Little Free Pantries come in. So one of our projects is Little Free Pantries. We've just kind of launched our first two pilot pantries, and one's on Harrison Avenue in Eureka, and one's on Fairfield in Eureka. And basically, they work a lot like the Little Free Libraries that people are more familiar with. There's a box outside of a person's home or business or a church or a school, and there's a steward who agrees to be in charge of maintaining it. And any kind of non-perishable food items and any kind of personal care items can be put in there. And the goal is that it becomes a community resource and a place that the whole neighborhood kind of adopts together. And I can say that in the less than a week since we put our first two up, that's proving to definitely be the case. They've been really, welcomed by the neighborhoods. The response has been overwhelmingly positive, and donations are showing up and pouring in, and the sometimes stewards are having to take some of the donations out to save for later because they've been very full. And people are also taking things out. So far, our first two look like they're doing really well, and our hope is to secure funding to roll out, 10 more in the next 6 months.
Programs like that are always super interesting to me. I worked at a youth garden years ago in Olympia, Washington, and when we put the garden in and let the kids in the apartment complex know that it was their garden, we were planting peas that they could take, and the kids were like, we're going to come steal them in the night. I was like, well, you can't steal it. It's already yours.
Yeah.
And that concept, they kind of would turn their head a little like, well, what do you mean?
Yeah.
So, and then would get into some interesting conversations around like, well, aren't you afraid that people are going to come take it? And I was like, well, that's the whole point.
Yeah.
But then there is some conversation that also happens around vandalism and how to keep it secure. So what does hosting it look like? And
sure.
Are there things that you guys address in that?
Yeah, and so far, those are definitely questions that we have on our minds. And kind of one of the reasons why we're doing a smaller, rollout initially. We're kind of hoping to test it out with maybe 3 to 5 people and see what some of the challenges might be, and then be able to provide that kind of support when we do the larger rollout for people. But, there's always that risk. There's always that risk that somebody could take advantage or damage it. But like I said, so far the response has been overwhelmingly positive. And I really think that, in general, when something like this comes to a community, there's a feeling for most people of like almost a relief at some level of, some small acknowledgement that that there's a different way we can be in community with each other. There's a different way that we can be together as a neighborhood and as a city and as a county. And so that's just kind of those little aha moments is what we're hoping to bring about with programs like this. And we are also, because you mentioned the garden, we're also, very interested in programs in doing like front lawn conversions. So for example, one of the very first little free pantry went in front of my house, and it's the little free pantry, and we're also converting our front lawn into a garden that will be for the benefit of the whole neighborhood. So those are two things that work really well together, the garden and the little free pantry, and they both do test those boundaries and those kind of societal norms we have of like, oh, don't step on somebody's property, don't take people's things, don't linger in front of their house, and that's a hurdle for people. So that's one of the things that is going to be really interesting of like how can we get past that and encourage people to think about it in a different way and engage with it in a different way. And so far with the pantry, it seems like the hurdle hasn't been very high. People are, engaging with it really quickly and comfortably.
One of the things that comes up when I think about something like that, if I was going to put something in front of my home, like there is an amount of kind of boundary that you want to draw.
Sure.
Yes, come take out of the pantry, maybe even take out of the garden, but that doesn't mean you're welcome to come into the house kind of thing.
Absolutely.
And like, how do you set those boundaries? I think that there is a fear that might even be justified around how people might push those boundaries once they're open. Although, on one other level, it's like, well, let's break down those boundaries altogether. But we do have actual like substance abuse problems and vandalism
Sure.
problems. And so, gosh, again, I ask these questions of like, well, what's the long range plan with that? Like, what are the goals in terms of having that stretch out, and how do you offer that tactical support around boundary creation, perhaps, or backup?
Those are really good
questions.
Those are really good questions. I would say, like, the long-term plan, if you're talking really long-term, is, we as an organization and as a community, we want to eliminate, obviously, all of that stuff. We want to eliminate homelessness. We want to eliminate substance abuse. We want to provide universal health care so that everybody's getting the, health care that they need, including mental health. Obviously, we're far from there, and what we're doing, our hope is that all of our programs, in one way or another, are tangible ways of demonstrating that, like, we as individuals believe that access to healthy food is a human right, that access to health care is a human right, and that it should be available to everyone, regardless of your health status, your immigration status, your marital status, any of those things. So sure, there's definitely going to be times, along that path to get from where we are to that place where we want to be, where there are going to be moments of discomfort and moments when we need to reevaluate and, be tactical and strategic and figure things out and, brainstorm solutions. But ultimately, the end goal is so important and so non-negotiable for us, that I think that going through some of those conversations and those moments of discomfort and reevaluation are well worth it.
So that conversation, and maybe this is a way to root in, I was noticing that you have the Cooperation Humboldt is hosting a webinar, and I believe it's today with David Cobb, called Building the Solidarity Economy, and it might be a place where people could learn a little bit more. Can you give us some direction on how people can contact you if they're interested in work? And then
our website is cooperationhumboldt.org, and we're also active on Facebook. And right after we hang up, I can post the link to that webinar on our Facebook page, so I'll make sure that gets put up. And since you brought up upcoming events, there are several others that I can let people know about, and they are all on our Facebook page in the events category. So we have a monthly potluck for anybody who's interested. The next one is on May 20th at 5 p.m. on our Facebook page. So there's the webinar today. Oh, I actually see that is on our events page already. So if you go to the Cooperation Humboldt Facebook page, click on events, there's a link to Building the Solidarity Economy webinar. It's today at 11, and that's through the Transition U.S. organization with one of our board members, David Cobb. Then we are co-sponsoring the May Day potluck tomorrow at the Labor Temple at 5 p.m. We're also co-sponsoring a candidates forum for 4th and 5th District Supervisor candidates on May 10th at 6 at the Labor Temple in Eureka. And we have a public banking forum coming up on May 14th at 7, and that is also at the Labor Temple in Eureka.
That's very interesting. I'm curious about that. What is a regional bank or public bank?
So the public bank concept, I believe there's one in North Carolina. There's a state bank, North Dakota. And the idea is that the bank is run, for the benefit of the public. So any projects that happen, whatever interest would usually be paid to corporations and banks actually goes back into the community. So it can be very cost-saving. There's also a lot of interest in public banking around cannabis, and that's one of the reasons it's getting a lot of attention right now in California. So there are some links to articles about that on our Facebook page recently, I think like in the last week. And in fact, there was legislation recently introduced. I don't want to give you the wrong information, so I'm just scrolling down to try to find it. But I think it was in the Senate, and it had to do with the idea of creating public banks through the post office. Mm-hmm. And so that's a really interesting idea.
It's an interesting overlay.
Yeah, so I just found it. So it's Kirsten Gillibrand unveils a public option for banking. And so, they're also presenting it as a low-cost alternative to payday loans and a way to help save the Postal Service. So, there's a link to that on our Facebook page, too. It's a very rich area to dive deeper into. I'm looking forward to the forum so I can learn more myself.
Excellent. That's an interesting one to bring forward, and it helps me understand a little bit more what you mean by solidarity economy. Mm-hmm. It sounds like most of the interfacing and information might be available on Facebook page. Is there a phone number that people who are not interneting could call to learn more information or to get involved?
There is, if I can find it. Give me just 1 second. So, you can also email cooperationhumboldt@gmail.com. And just 1 second, let me find the phone number.
Thank you. I know it's Facebook's such an interesting and wonderful place to post information and to have public dialogue, and then there's also, we just need to also remember that not everybody engages in that for different reasons.
Absolutely, so and people have more and more legitimate reasons for not doing so. So that's understandable as well. Let's see. Okay, so the phone number that people can call, which I should have memorized, but I don't, it's 707-362-0333.
All right. Thank you so much for joining us this morning, and look forward to hearing more about the work as time goes on.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, bye.
Bye.